Chapter 71 Lawler. With the fortress taken, Maximus sent a messenger to tell the soldiers it was safe to cross. Hundreds of ships moved in, and dozens of airships began transporting the legions to their assigned location. The army was split up into 3 different legions. The first legion was led by Alexander and Achilles, who would head to the western islands to eliminate the demons' occupation of the islands. The second legion led by Olerin and Dane II, who would head to the eastern islands, eliminating the demons from occupying the islands. The third legion, joined by Merlin and Lilith, would join up with Maximus at Tyrian to establish a base and rest for 3 days before launching a combined assault on Valyria with all 3 legions. The 3 days would be used to allow the 2 other legions to conquer the islands surrounding Valyria and rest for the final battle. On the sea, Admiral Thorn had been defending against aerial and sea demons for the past few hours since the battle started. Admiral Thorn stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Imperial Fury, surrounded by the vast Imperial fleet. 800 ships of the line encircled the island, their cannons blazing as they repelled wave after wave of demonic attackers. Smoke and fire filled the air as demonic creatures attempted to break through the naval blockade, but Thorn and her officers met them with iron and cannons. "Reload all batteries. Keep them off our flanks," she ordered, her voice cutting through the chaos of battle. Her officers relayed her commands, and within seconds, another devastating volley erupted from the warships, tearing through the grotesque forms of demonic sea beasts attempting to breach their lines. Above them, monstrous flying demons with jagged wings and burning eyes swooped down, shrieking as they descended upon the fleet. Harpoon guns and ballistae, manned by expert gunners, fired at the creatures, impaling them mid-flight and sending their bodies plunging into the sea. From the decks, Imperial archers and mages unleashed their attacks. Arrows tipped with explosive runes found their targets, detonating on impact and reducing demons to smoldering husks. Battle mages cast powerful spells, summoning wind to throw winged demons off balance and conjuring torrents of fire that turned the sky into an inferno. A group of larger sea demons, each the size of a galleon, surged forward, their monstrous forms breaking through the waves. They slammed into the hulls of the outermost warships, attempting to capsize them. Thorn narrowed her eyes and turned to her officers. "Signal the Stormbreaker and Thunder's Wrath. Deploy depth charges." The depth charges were just steel canisters filled with TNT. The 2 designated warships swiftly maneuvered into position. With a series of deep booms, heavy explosives were launched into the water. Moments later, the sea shook violently as the charges detonated beneath the monstrous attackers. The beasts shrieked and trembled before their bodies were torn apart by the concussive force. Despite their efforts, the demonic fleet showed no signs of relenting. More creatures emerged from the abyss, accompanied by cursed vessels, ships of blackened bone and metal, their hulls adorned with screaming, tormented souls. These vessels, manned by the damned, sailed forth, attempting to break the Imperial blockade. "Fire the Hellfire rounds. Sink those abominations," Thorn ordered. The Iron Vow and its surrounding warships adjusted their cannons. With a series of thunderous roars, projectiles streaked across the sky, striking the cursed ships. The vessels erupted into flames, the unholy energies within them combusting in a series of violent explosions. But the enemy still had more horrors to unleash. A massive, hulking form rose from the depths, a sea demon of titanic proportions, covered in jagged armor and dripping with dark energy. Its maw opened, revealing rows of serrated teeth large enough to bite a warship in half. As it emerged, the waters around it turned into a maelstrom, dragging Imperial vessels toward its gaping mouth. Thorn gritted her teeth. "All ships, evasive maneuvers. Focus fire on that thing." The fleet sprang into action. Cannons shot, harpoons were launched, and battle mages focused their most powerful spells. The creature screeched as barrages of cannon fire blasted into its armor. Still, it pressed forward undeterred. Then, from above, Nyxina descended. Her dark form sliced through the air, her glowing eyes locked onto the beast. With a guttural roar, she unleashed a wave of dark magic, striking the sea demon with unrelenting force. The beast thrashed violently as its life force was drained, its body withering beneath Nyxina's power. Within moments, it let out one final, echoing shriek before collapsing back into the abyss. Thorn exhaled sharply, but there was no time to celebrate. More demonic vessels approached from the horizon. However, the tide was turning. With Nyxina's arrival and the fleet's steadfast defense, the blockade would hold. She turned to her officers. Signal the main fleet. We hold the line at all costs." As the battle raged on, the sea burned with the wreckage of fallen demons, and the Imperial fleet stood firm, ensuring that no demon would leave the region and spread to the rest of the world. With the naval battle securing the blockade, the legions of the Empire landed upon the shores of Tyria, a city long since corrupted by the demonic presence. The First Legion, led by Alexander and Achilles, stormed the western islands, cutting down hordes of demons in brutal combat. The Myrmidons and Dawnborn spearmen formed unbreakable phalanxes, their shields and spears driving deep into the enemy ranks, while Dothraki archers rained fire from the rooftops. The Second Legion, under Alarin and Dane II, advanced from the eastern shores, engaging towering infernal war machines and demonic constructs. The Dwarven engineers worked swiftly, rigging explosive charges to weaken the structures, while the Black Guard of Nagarond used their ethereal blades to carve through the monstrosities. Meanwhile, Maximus and the Third Legion, reinforced by Merlin and Lilith, defended the city of Tyria. Wyverns and Valkyries dominated the skies, battling winged horrors that sought to retake the demonic stronghold. Maximus, atop Nyxera, led devastating aerial assaults, his twin blades carving through demonic generals as Nyxera's dark flames engulfed entire battalions. On the ground, Merlin's magic split the earth, sending waves of arcane energy that incinerated anything in their path. Lilith, wielding forbidden sorcery, summoned ethereal warriors that struck terror into the hearts of the demonic horde. The battle raged for hours, but as the sun began to set, Tyria's defenses held strong. The Imperial forces stood victorious, though at great cost. The ruins of the city would serve as a staging ground for the final assault on Valyria. With Tyria secured, the three legions rested and reinforced their ranks. For 3 days, healers tended to the wounded, blacksmiths repaired weapons, and commanders devised their strategies. The final battle was near. Scouts reported that Valyria itself had become a fortress of the damned, its historically grand walls now covered in writhing flesh and veins of infernal energy. R'hlloreth's forces had gathered in full strength, waiting for the inevitable confrontation. On the eve of the march, Maximus stood before his gathered warriors. "Tomorrow, we face the source of this darkness. We do not fight for conquest, nor for glory. We fight to reclaim this place from the abyss. The fate of all hangs in the balance." A roar of approval surged through the ranks. The final battle was at hand. The sky above Valyria burned with crimson fire as the three legions advanced. Demonic war horns echoed through the ruins, and the air was filled with the scent of brimstone and death. The battlefield was unlike any other. Valyria's once proud streets were now rivers of molten rock, its towering structures fused with flesh, breathing like living entities. From atop the blackened walls, R'hlloreth's demonic horde shrieked and howled, awaiting the slaughter. Maximus led the charge, his twin blades in hand infused with his new demigod power. Behind him, the Imperial legions charged forward, clashing against the demonic army. The battle erupted into screams, steel, and dark sorcery. Achilles and Alexander led their warriors through the western flank, cutting through twisted abominations with brutal efficiency. Achilles danced through the battlefield, his spear a blur of death, while Alexander's tactical precision ensured every maneuver was executed to perfection. The Myrmidons and Dawnborn cut a bloody swath through demonic champions, while Dothraki horsemen trampled the grotesque spawn beneath their hooves. Alarin and Dane too fought at the eastern front, where demonic siege engines rained hellfire upon the advancing troops. Dwarven war machines retaliated with explosive payloads, bringing down the monstrous constructs. Alarin's staff blazed with fire, burning away the darkness, while Dane led his ironclad dwarven brothers into the thick of battle, axes cleaving demon and fiend alike. In the skies, Nyxena and the Valkyries battled winged horrors, their celestial lances piercing through leathery wings and setting the creatures ablaze. Wyverns and drakes clashed in aerial duels, their roars shaking the battlefield below. The very heavens were a storm of divine and infernal energies. At the heart of the battle, Maximus pressed forward, carving his way toward the great obsidian temple where R'hllor awaited. He cut through waves of demons, his demigod powers making him unstoppable. With a mere swing of his sword, he vaporized dozens of enemies. His footsteps shattered the ground beneath him, and his mere presence sent weaker fiends fleeing in terror. As he reached the temple steps, the earth trembled, the doors parted, and from within, R'hllor emerged. The dark god stood tall, wreathed in fire and shadow, his crimson eyes burning with malice. His form was monstrous, shifting between solid and ethereal, a living being of rage and destruction. "So, the mortal who defies the divine has finally come," R'hllor stated. "You are nothing before me." Maximus did not waste time with petty dialogue. He launched himself forward, his blades striking against R'hllor's burning form. The impact sent shockwaves across the battlefield. R'hllor retaliated with a blast of hellfire, but Maximus absorbed the flames, his demigod body negating the weakened dark god's power. He countered with a strike that tore through R'hllor's chest, sending divine energy ripping through his form. The battle between them was cataclysmic. Every strike shattered the area around them. Every clash of steel and fire sent shockwaves through the battlefield. R'hllor summoned chains of molten fire, attempting to bind Maximus, but he shattered them with sheer force. With each wound inflicted upon the dark god, the sky above flickered. Drawing upon the last of his power, R'hllor attempted to unleash an apocalyptic surge of fire, aiming to incinerate everything in existence. But Maximus, channeling the full might of his power, thrust his twin blades forward, piercing the god's core. A deafening explosion of light and darkness erupted as R'hllor's form began to break apart, his essence unraveling. "You are no god," Maximus said as he drove his blades deeper, "and this world will never be yours." With a final cry of defiance, R'hllor's body was consumed in an explosion, his essence torn apart. The dark god was no more. As the battlefield fell silent, the demonic army lost its cohesion, their master's destruction shattering their will. The Imperial legions, seeing their moment, pressed the attack. The demons, now leaderless, were annihilated. When the sun finally rose over Valyria, it shone upon a land freed from darkness. The ruins still smoldered, and the scars of war remained, but victory was theirs. Maximus stood atop the temple ruins. He had done what no man had ever done. He had slain a god, or at least the weakened form of a god. He was already told how if R'hllor could use his actual god form, that he would stand no chance at all. The war was over. As the legions gathered in the ruined capital, a new dawn began. The Empire had triumphed, and the world wouldn't have to worry about an invasion. Chapter 72, R'hllor's second form. The war was over, or at least that was what Maximus thought. As his army gathered in the ruined capital city of Valyria, a crack appeared in the sky above. From within, a glow seeped through, casting a light over the ruined capital of Valyria. The gathered legions stood in stunned silence, their victory now cast in doubt. A rumble emanated from beyond the opening, and then came the scream, a sound so loud that it shook even the most hardened warriors to their core. A storm of fire and shadow poured forth as a large number of demons, greater in number and horror than before, spilled into the sky. These were not the remnants of the previous demon army. This was a completely new force summoned by R'hllor. They came with twisted forms, nightmarish visages, and an intimidating aura. From the sky, a colossal figure emerged. Larger than before, wreathed in blackened fire, R'hllor had returned in his new form. His new form was still a weakened version of his main body, but stronger than it was before. His body was engulfed in an endless fire. His eyes gazed down at Maximus with contempt. "I warned you, mortal." R'hllor's voice sounded throughout the area. "I am eternal. You are but a speck of dust that has ruined my plans for the last time." Maximus clenched his fists, preparing for this next battle. When he killed him before, he felt that the battle was too easy, and now he knew why. The Imperial legions reformed, their ranks tightening together in formation as the demons landed all around the fortress and charged ferociously at the Imperial legions. Achilles and Alexander roared commands to their legion, leading the Myrmidons and Dawnborn into the fray. Olorin channeled his magic, conjuring barriers of light to repel the incoming enemy forces. Dane too gathered his dwarven warriors and worked together with the swordmasters of Hoth to form a defensive line. Nyxina and the Valkyries took to the skies once more, aimed towards the aerial demons. Merlin and Lilith unleashed their sorcery, forming defensive walls to block the demons and allow their legions to get into a proper defensive formation. Maximus himself leapt into battle, his dual swords, Dawn's Here and Duskfang, glowing with black flames. He cut through the demonic horde, his strikes cutting through both flesh and bones. But R'hllor was already descending, his form crashing onto the battlefield with the force of a falling asteroid. The ground split apart beneath him, veins of hellfire spreading like roots, consuming everything in their path. R'hllor extended his hand, and the sky itself turned red. Meteoric fire rained from above, crashing into the Imperial ranks, reducing entire battalions to ash. Maximus barely evaded a falling attack, rolling to his feet in time to see R'hllor striding toward him. "Even with your demigod abilities, you can't be a god," R'hllor growled, his form constantly expanding. "Your defiance is meaningless, and once I'm done with you, the Lord of Light will be the only thing the world knows." Maximus raised his blades. "I won't allow that to happen." Maximus launched himself toward R'hllor, his blades aimed at his head. The impact sent shockwaves through the battlefield as R'hllor blocked the attack with his own demonic sword made of nothing but pure fire and countered with an eruption of hellfire. Maximus absorbed the flames, using them to fuel his own attacks. He used his strength pushing his sword against R'hllor, forcing him back a few feet. After that, the battle went to another level. They moved at impossible speeds, striking across the battlefield in bursts of light and shadow. Each clash of their blades sent ripples of destruction through Valyria, toppling what little remained of the ruined city. The legions fought beneath them, locked in their own desperate struggle against the demonic forces. R'hllor's rage grew. He used his blade of pure fire and slashed through reality, rupturing the air as he swung at Maximus. Maximus dodged, barely escaping the strike which would have probably killed him, and managed to recover quickly. Raising Dawnshear and Duskfang, he swung back, his blades clashing against the fire sword once again. The exchange was relentless, neither giving nor gaining ground. After a few clashes back and forth, Maximus managed to deliver a cut to R'hllor's chest. His blood spilled onto the ground, hissing as it touched the ground. "You wound me, mortal," R'hllor admitted, "but I do not bleed as you do." He swung again, and this time Maximus felt the full force of a god's fury. The blow sent him hurtling through the remains of Valyria, crashing through the stone walls as he dropped both his swords. He groaned, pushing himself up just in time to see R'hllor standing over him. "You cannot stop what is inevitable," R'hllor declared, raising his blade for the final strike. But Maximus did not just sit there and take that. Maximus caught his blade with his bare hands as he started to burn his hands despite how strong he was. He pulled the sword towards him, which also pulled R'hllor closer. Using his free hand, he poured a ton of his power into his hand as he shoved it directly through R'hllor's abdomen. R'hllor let out an extremely loud scream, cracks appearing across his body. He had unleashed his magic power through R'hllor's body, weakening him even more. Using this chance, Maximus grabbed both his swords again and turned to face R'hllor, who was struggling to stand up. "You!" R'hllor hissed, his voice trembling with fury and disbelief. "You dare!" Maximus wasted no time. He dashed forward, both Dawnshear and Duskfang igniting in black and white flames. With a single hop, he closed the distance, carving an X-shaped arc across R'hllor's chest. He staggered back, his body beginning to break under the damage he had taken, spilling a ton of his blood on the ground. He let out another scream, this one not of rage, but of realization. "No, I am R'hllor. I am eternal. I cannot be defeated." Maximus didn't let him speak further. With on final leap, he brought both swords down, driving them straight into R'hllor's core. The impact sent a massive shockwave across the battlefield, forcing even demons and legions alike to halt their fighting. A terrible silence followed. Then R'hllor exploded. A pillar of fire erupted from his form as his body collapsed inward, pulling the remnants of his mortal form. The above, once torn open by his arrival, began to close. The demonic forces, sensing the fall of their master, screamed in agony as their bodies crumbled into ash. The Imperial legions stood in silence. Achilles and Alexander, bloodied, lifted their weapons high. Dane and his dwarves shouted in triumph, their war horns echoing through the ruined city. Alarin, Merlin, and Lilith lowered their hands, their magic no longer needed. He hoped that this was the end. A few seconds later, his question was answered as a system prompt popped up. Defeat the god R'hllor and prevent the demonic invasion of the world. Rewards: -1 million system points, -100,000 free summons. May choose to summon any number of any type of soldier for free without spending system points. The 100,000 free summons was something as he could literally summon any powerful soldier he wanted. In fact, he would say that it was better than the 1 million system points because it was free. Putting the prompt away, He turned towards his army, who was looking at him in silence. They were waiting for him, their emperor, to speak. "We have won," he roared. "We stood against a god and emerged victorious." A wave of cheers erupted from the legions, their joyous shouts shaking the earth beneath them. They had seen death, went against demonic creatures, and survived. Now they were celebrating their victory. Now that the war was actually over, Maximus ordered a count of their casualties and issued orders to start claiming the island for their own. The ruined capital of Valyria had lots of things from hundreds of years ago during the age of the Valyrian freehold. He wanted to find these riches and claim them for himself. In addition to this, he also planned to turn Valyria into a massive new citadel. It would be like a secondary capital for the Imperial Union, a new commercial hub for ships before they head to Qarth and the rest of the east. After a week had passed, the final number of casualties was placed upon Maximus's desk. The number was a lot more than he expected. A total of 247,521 were dead out of the 600,000 people that Maximus brought with him. 123,432 were injured, leaving only 229,047 active soldiers to guard the region. The injured were not a problem, as they could be injured back to full health with the use of magic and other things. But to honor those who died, Maximus sent out an order for a part of the city to be dedicated to the dead warriors. A massive monolithic structure would be created, and would house every single dead warrior's body alongside their name and the warrior's code, signifying that they willingly risked their lives to defend the world from evil. Tens of thousands of stonemasons and carpenters were already on their way to Valyria to start the reconstruction of city and the surrounding islands. Having been away from the going-ons of the rest of the world, Maximus had a pile of papers reporting on what happened in Westeros and Essos. In Westeros, a tourney had taken place in honor of Prince Joffrey's 12th name day as the Crown Prince. Maximus was invited to this, but he respectfully declined as he has other more important matters to attend to. In the north, Robb Stark had just returned from his studies in Heaven's Reach to Winterfell. He had spent the last 6 years studying at Heaven's Reach, learning some great skills in swordsmanship and leadership. House Stark was a great trading partner of the Imperial Union, importing most of their food from the Imperial Union because of how cheap it was. Dorne had sent a few coins and ships which contributed to the war effort, not that Maximus needed it, but he could see that they were trying so hard to befriend him. Arianne had reached the age of 22, and she was getting more desperate by the day to hear his response to the proposal he received years ago. Since things were relatively calm now, he decided he would accept their offer and visit them personally to discuss who would be a part of his imperial harem. He had yet to have any kids, but now was as good a time as any to settle down and embrace the more lustful sides of being an emperor. The rest of Westeros didn't have anything of value, so he moved on to Essos. Migrants from the Far East had arrived in Viz Dothrak in tattered clothes and with malnourished bodies, claiming to have run away from their lord who was slain. They fled their city out of fear for their new lord, but were cut off by his army and forced to flee further west, where they met with the Imperial Border Patrol and sent to Viz Dothrak. The migrants were given refugee status and given food and clothing, while an emissary and investigation was launched into what was going on in the Far East. In Qarth, the House of the Undying has begun moving their forces to combat the spread of the Imperial Union's influence. They began searching for allies in the Far East from amidst the warlords of ET. This was not a significant problem, but it was still something to keep an eye on, so he put Faraday and his Shadowhand agents on a mission to monitor Qarth and all of its movements. Chapter 73, Start of the Game of Thrones. Jaehaerys Targaryen, the younger brother of Viserys, yet was always within the shadow of his older brother, grew up hating Viserys. He often fought with Viserys and expressed his constant dislike of his mother Rhaella to her face. Maximus tried to show him some time ago that this was not the case, but he wasn't hearing it. As a result, he had fled the Imperial Union and had been missing since then. He managed to flee all the way to Qarth, where he stood out because of his hair color. This caused him to get captured by one of the servants of the Pureborn, who are the noble rulers of Qarth. The servant brought Jaehaerys to his master's residence and presented him as a gift to gain some favor. The servant's master, Sono Rakaris, had taken a liking to Jaehaerys, whom he saw much potential in because of his lineage and the locked abilities that he had. Sono was a scheming man with a silver tongue and an uncanny ability to manipulate others. He took on Jaehaerys as a protege, seeing the boy's untapped potential and fiery spirit as tools he could command, and got to work immediately. He filled the young Targaryen's head with promises of power, whispering seeds of doubt about his family and fueling the resentment Jaehaerys harbored towards his older brother. And through it all, Sono positioned himself as a steadfast ally, the only person who truly understood and appreciated Jaehaerys' worth. Through it all, Jaehaerys was completely captured. His anger and emotions was used against him. Born in 280 AC, he was currently 18 years old, having fled the Imperial Union at 16. Before he left, he had received an education at the Imperial Academies, having gained a swath of knowledge. Now he was going to use that knowledge, plus the knowledge he would obtain, to get what he wanted. In Westeros, a few things were happening that would begin to change the balance of power on the continent. Jon Arryn had been killed inside of his own office. His body was found with his throat slit sitting in his own chair within the Tower of the Hand. His death was a mystery, and King Robert ordered an immediate investigation. Using the network of spies belonging to the Master of Whispers, Varys, an accusation was quickly put forward that Jon had discovered a secret he should not have known and was killed for it. The hidden channels of the royal court buzzed with rumors, some implicating the Lannisters while others cast suspicion on House Baelish. In response to this, King Robert traveled to Winterfell personally to meet with his best friend Eddard Stark. At first Ned was reluctant to accept the position as he felt there was something ominous about Jon's death and was hesitant to leave Winterfell. His worries were amplified by a Raven's letter from Lysa Arryn, Jon's widow. The letter stated, "My late husband was murdered by the Lannisters. Do not trust them. That which Cersei was either behind his death or the one that killed him because of something he found that she was hiding." The letter had been written in distressed, quick handwriting, letting him know that Lysa herself was also terrified. The visit from Robert pressuring him to go to King's Landing and the mysterious letter from Lysa left his mind congested with thoughts, most of which were nightmare scenarios. He contemplated his options, worried about the safety of his family, the future of his house, and tried to decide what course of action would serve everyone best. As he was lost in thought in his office, a shadow emerged from one of the dark corners of his room. "Lord Stark," the voice announced. Normally a person would get defensive, seeing a person emerging from the darkness and not using the door, but this wasn't the first time that Ned had a private talk with one of the Shadowhand agents. "If you decided to go to King's Landing, you would uncover something that will change the entire continent and shift the balance of power between the houses. I can't say much, but you will uncover Jon Arryn's killer and help shape the continent for the better. The Shadowhand have decided to back you should you accept King Robert's appointment and will ensure that each member of your house remains protected," explained the agent, handing him a piece of paper that had some wise words on it. Ned took the letter from the Shadowhand agent. His brow wrinkled as he read the words written. "Truth is the foundation upon which justice stands. Deception may weave the tapestry of power, but it is always undone by the one thread of honesty. The cost of truth is high, but the cost of silence is greater." He stared at the words for a long moment, feeling the weight of them. He had always been a man of honor, a man who placed truth and justice above all else. And if Jon Arryn had been murdered for uncovering something that threatened the balance of power in the realm, then it was his duty to see that justice was done. Ned sighed, knowing there was only one choice he could make. He could not ignore the call to duty, no matter how ominous the circumstances surrounding Jon's death were. He stood up and turned to the Shadowhand agent. "I will accept Robert's appointment. So, tell them that if they mean to keep my family safe, they'd best be ready." The agent nodded and disappeared as quickly as he had come, leaving Ned alone with his thoughts. The next morning, he informed Robert of his decision. His wife, Catelyn, was not pleased, but she understood that her husband's sense of duty would not allow him to refuse. Preparations were made, and soon Ned Stark, along with his daughters Sansa and Arya, rode south to King's Landing alongside King Robert and his retinue. Upon arriving in the capital, Ned was immediately thrown into the tangled web of politics that defined the royal court. He quickly discovered that the court was filled with secrets, whispered alliances, and backstabbing schemes. Littlefinger, the ever-smiling master of coin, extended a hand of friendship, while Varys, the master of whispers, observed him with an unreadable expression. Despite his distaste for courtly intrigue, Ned wasted no time in investigating Jon Arryn's death. He retraced Jon's final days, speaking with his former contacts and gathering any information he could. Maester Pycelle claimed Jon had slit his own throat at the heavy burden that being Hand of the King brought, but the old man's nervous demeanor made Ned suspicious. He also learned that Jon had been visiting an armorer's shop in the city before his death. Following this lead, Ned discovered the shop belonged to Tobo Mott, a master armorer known for his fine craftsmanship. There, he met a young apprentice, Gendry, a boy with strong Baratheon features. It was then that Ned realized what Jon Arryn had discovered. Robert Baratheon's bastards bore the strong, black-haired traits of their father, while his supposed children with Queen Cersei all had golden locks. The truth hit Ned like a hammer. Jon Arryn had learned that Robert's children were not his own. The heirs to the throne were not Baratheons. They were Lannisters, born of incest between Cersei and her brother Jaime. Understanding the gravity of his discovery, Ned sought counsel from Littlefinger, who urged him to move carefully. "You have the truth, Lord Stark, but truth is not always enough. Power must be on your side before you act." Ned, however, was not one for deception or playing the Game of Thrones. He confronted Cersei directly, warning her to leave King's Landing before he revealed the truth to Robert. But Cersei did not flee. Instead, she moved swiftly. Before Ned could reach Robert, the king was mortally wounded in a hunting accident, an accident that was far too convenient. On his deathbed, Robert named Ned as regent and protector of the realm, but the decree was quickly dismissed by Cersei and her allies. When Ned attempted to take control and declare Stannis Baratheon as the rightful heir, he found himself betrayed. Littlefinger, whom he had trusted to support him, turned on him. The City Watch, whom he believed would enforce Robert's decree, instead turned their swords against him. Ned Stark was arrested on charges of treason and taken to the dungeons of the Red Keep. As he sat in his dark cell, he thought back to the words on the note given to him by the Shadowhand agent. "The cost of truth is high, but the cost of silence is greater." He had chosen truth, and now he would pay the price for it. Yet, even in chains, he knew this was not the end of his story, nor the end of the storm that was coming for the realm. As he was tied up, in the dungeons of the Red Keep, a Shadowhand agent had emerged once again from the darkness, holding a torch. Ned looked up as he tiredly asked, "Are they safe?" The Shadowhand agent nodded his head. "Yes, they are safe, Lord Stark. Both Sansa and Arya have been taken to one of our hideouts located within the city. The Queen has locked down the port, so we can't escort them back to Winterfell," the agent explained. "Thank you. I guess in the end, I must pay the price." The agent didn't say anything and just disappeared back into the darkness. Chapter 74, Imperial Wedding. While Ned Stark was being held by Queen Cersei, in Heaven's Reach, the members of House Martell has arrived within the Imperial Palace in preparation for the wedding. Prince Doran Martell, who had been diagnosed with gout, had been completely healed by one of the Imperial healers several years ago. Because of this, he could walk normally and didn't need a stick to walk. The wedding bells echoed through the halls of the Imperial Palace. All throughout Imperial cities, the people were able to watch through the magic projectors created by dwarven craftsmen. As the last of the guests took their seats within the Grand Hall, the wedding began. Maximus was standing at the front of the altar, dressed in ceremonial attire. By his side stood Alexander and one of the priestess who worships Mother Royne. The priestess was the one who would oversee the marriage, as the worship of Mother Royne had become the dominant religion within the Imperial Union over recent years. Standing on the other side were the reformed Dosh Khaleen. The Dosh Khaleen used to be the former wives of Khals who had died. Now they were turned into prominent figures who are now leaders of the religion focused around the worship of the Great Stallion. These two were the most dominant religion within the Imperial Union, and both saw Maximus as a step below both the respective god and goddess and the chosen one. The hall fell silent as the huge double doors opened, revealing the entirety of the Imperium harem standing in wait. From front to back were Lilith, Merlin, Hela, Lyra, and then Arryn Martell. The gathered nobles and dignitaries turned their heads as the doors fully opened, their gazes fixed upon the procession. Lilith, the first to enter, was draped in crimson silks embroidered with golden lining. Beside her, Merlin moved with her silver robes. Hela, clad in dark green lined with silver, walked with a presence that reminded all of her status as the mistress of death. Lyra followed, adorned in regal blue, the very image of noble serenity. Lastly, Arryn Martell took slow, deliberate steps forward, dressed in flowing orange and gold, colors of House Martell. Gasps rippled through the hall as the women made their entrance. The Imperium harem was no ordinary collection of consorts. Each woman was a force unto herself, wielding power, influence, or in some cases, divine favor. Their very presence symbolized the unity of the Imperial Union. And now, with Arryn's inclusion, the bonds between Dorne and the Empire would be sealed. As Arryn approached the altar, Maximus looked at the dress that was made with Dornish craftsmanship. This was no mere political marriage. It was a statement to the world that Dorne was no longer a kingdom on the fringes, but now an integral part of the Imperial Union, Part of the agreement that was made between Prince Doran and Maximus was that Dorne would become an autonomous territory ruled by House Martell as it had been for centuries. The Dornish were allowed to keep their culture and everything unique about them in exchange. They would also have to follow imperial established laws and few other things. Over 60% of the Dornish nobles agreed with the action taken by Prince Doran, claiming it to be securing Dorne's future and influence within Westeros. The other 40% claimed him to be bowing down to a foreign ruler and selling Dorne's independence. Unfazed by the political unrest, Arianna ascended the steps towards the altar, where she would take the pledge required by a foreigner when they are marrying the emperor. Arianne reached the top of the altar, standing before Maximus with her chin lifted. The grand hall remained silent as the priestess of Mother Rhoyne raised a gilded staff, the symbol of her station, and began the sacred rite. Before the eyes of Mother Rhoyne, the great stallion, and the empire itself, we bear witness to the union of Emperor Maximus and Princess Arianne Martell. This bond shall endure beyond war, beyond time, beyond death itself. Arianne turned slightly as two reformed Dashkaline stepped forward, one carrying a small, intricately carved basin of water from the Rhoyne, the other a bowl filled with sand from the vast Dothraki Sea. To marry the emperor is to become more than what you were, the priestess stated, dipping her hand into the water and anointing Arianne's forehead. You come from the rivers of the south, where the blood of old Valyria once mingled with that of the Rhoyner. Today, that blood shall mix with the lifeblood of the empire. The Dashkaline dipped her own fingers into the sand and traced a mark upon Arianne's hand. You walk as a daughter of Dorne, but now you shall ride with the empire as one of its own. Arianne did not flinch. She had been prepared for this moment by her father, for the weight it carried. She turned to Maximus and spoke in a clear voice. I, Arianne of House Martell, daughter of Dorne, pledge myself to you, Emperor Maximus. I shall stand beside you as one of your queens, bound in blood and duty, as one with the Imperial Union. Maximus stepped forward. And I, Maximus, Emperor of the Imperial Union, take you, Arianne Martell, as my wife and one of my queens. You shall rule beside me, and through time your wisdom and fire will guide the people. The priestess brought forth a ceremonial dagger, its blade forged by both Valyrian and Rhoynish smiths, and sliced a shallow cut into Maximus' palm, then Arianne's. Their blood mingled as they clasped hands, sealing the marriage in the ancient traditions of both Valyria and the Rhoyner. A light surrounded their joined hands, magic infused into the rite, marking the divine recognition of their union. The magic projectors displayed the sacred moment across the imperial cities. The people bore witness to the rise of the imperial harem. Cheers erupted from the crowd, a thunderous declaration that the union had been sealed. The title of queen was one that was chosen for members of the imperial harem. The title of empress was only reserved for the ruler of the imperium, similar to the title of empress. Lilith, Merlin, Hela, and Lyra were already known widely as the queens and didn't need to do the blood rite. They still went through the same thing as Arianne, and as they were officially granted the title of queen. Once all the official stuff was over, the festivities started. This is where all the nobles and other dignitaries relaxed and started to enjoy the atmosphere of the imperial palace. Maximus had also met the wife of Olerin. He couldn't believe at first that the old man had gotten married, but when he thought about it, Olerin was a man who had needs and such. Alexander and Achilles also had their guests who were not their wives yet. They often flirted with a number of women but had not taken any wives yet. But seeing Maximus and Olerin get married made them want to find somebody to settle down with. Ianwe was in the middle, where he enjoyed his free life right now and didn't want to get settled down so soon. His lifespan was immense, and he didn't want to be held back because of commitment. Time passed, until night came around when the true fun began. Luckily Maximus was a demigod now. If not, he probably wouldn't have enough energy for the amount of pleasure he would indulge in throughout the night. As the news reached Westeros in the next 2 weeks, the continent was thrown in an uproar. The newly crowned king of the Seven Kingdoms, Joffrey Baratheon, had caused a scene within the small council room after hearing about Dorne succeeding from crown. He called for war but was shot down by his mother Cersei, who understood how to play the Game of Thrones and the power that the Imperial Union had. The small council backed her as well, claiming that they could not go to war with the Imperial Union yet with all of the things that were going on. He reluctantly accepted and instead ordered for the execution of Lord Stark. Cersei agreed, wanting to put on a little show of intimidation to draw his daughters out of wherever they were hiding. When the Ravens arrived at Winterfell bearing news of Lord Stark's imprisonment and the disappearance of Sansa and Arya, Robb Stark felt the weight of the North suddenly fall upon his shoulders. He was young, But he was no fool. His father had always taught him to think before he acted, to never rush blindly into battle. But this was his father. The hall of Winterfell was filled with lords sworn to House Stark, gathered at Robb's summons. They had heard the rumors, the whispers from the south. Lord Eddard had been accused of treason. King Robert was dead, and Joffrey Baratheon sat the Iron Throne. Now, with the news that Joffrey intended to execute Lord Stark, there was no more room for hesitation. "I will not sit idle while my father is butchered like a common criminal," Robb said, standing before his bannermen. "The Lannisters think the North will bend, that we will kneel like whipped dogs. But we are wolves, and wolves do not bow to lions." Cheers and shouts of approval rang through the hall. The North had been wary of Southern rule for generations, and now they had the perfect excuse to fight back. But Robb knew this was more than a simple act of rebellion. This was a game of power, and every move had to be played with precision. A raven had also come from the Shadowhand, its message brief but clear: "Your sisters are safe, but King's Landing is no place for them to remain for long. The game has begun, and your next move will decide the fate of the North." It was then that Theon Greyjoy, standing beside Robb, suggested a bold move. "The Riverlands stand between us and the South. If we march, we must have their support." Maester Luwin nodded. "Your grandfather, Lord Hoster Tully, will want vengeance for what has been done to Jon Arryn. But the Riverlands are vulnerable, caught between us and the Lannisters." Robb turned to his mother, Catelyn, who was seated nearby, her face pale but composed. "We need Riverrun," he said. "We need our mother's house." Catelyn met his gaze and nodded. "Then you must ride for war, my son, and may the old gods watch over you." The call went out across the North, and banners were raised. The direwolf of House Stark was gathering, and the Lannisters would soon learn what it meant to provoke the North. The news of Dorne's defection and the Imperial Union's power did not sit well with Lord Tywin Lannister. He read the reports in silence, his expression unreadable, but he was clearly frustrated. "The boy wants war," he said, referring to Joffrey. "Foolish. A war with the Imperial Union would be suicide." Kevan Lannister nodded. "Queen Cersei has kept him in check, but his temper will not hold. And now the North has raised its banners. The wolves mean to march." Tywin steepled his fingers. "Then let them march. Let them spill blood for a dead man. We have bigger concerns." Dorne's departure was a disaster for the realm. The loss of its armies was one thing, but the greater concern was its alignment with the Imperial Union. If the Dornish brought their strength into a southern war, the balance of power in Westeros would shift beyond repair. "We will deal with the Starks first," Tywin said at last. "Then, we will prepare for what comes next." Far to the south, Renly Baratheon read the same reports and saw a different opportunity. With Robert dead and Stannis claiming Dragonstone, the kingdom was fractured. If the North marched, if war consumed the realm, there would be a chance for him to make his own move. But the Imperial Union, that was something else. "They did not just take Dorne," Renly said as he stood on the ramparts of Storm's End. "They are reshaping the world." Ser Loras Tyrell, standing beside him, scoffed. "Then let them shape it. We still have a throne to take." Renly smiled, but in the back of his mind, he knew that the game was changing. If he wanted to be king, he could not just play against his brothers and the Lannisters. He would have to watch the Imperial Union, for they were not just players in the game. They were becoming the game itself. Stannis read the news alongside the letter from Ned Stark in his chamber. He had long had a feeling that Joffrey was not Robert's true son, and now that Ned Stark had been imprisoned for discovering the truth. It was an outrage, but more than that, it was an opportunity. "The throne is mine by right," Stannis declared to Ser Davos, "and I will take it." Davos hesitated. "My lord, the Imperial Union is growing in strength. Their influence now reaches across the seas. We must tread carefully or try to convince them that our cause is just." Stannis narrowed his eyes. "Carefully? I will not sit by while my throne is stolen. We must act, Davos. We must find allies before it is too late." And so he prepared for war. Meanwhile, across the sea, in the city of Qarth, Jaehaerys Targaryen had just been spotted by a Shadowhand agent within one of the residences belonging to the 13 of Qarth. Unlike other places, Qarth had warlocks, which are powerful magic users with powerful abilities. The 13 were the most powerful of the warlocks and had employed the most powerful warlocks under them. The ones sent to help out the slave cities some years ago were not even the best of the best. This made spying on them significantly harder than other places. They already had several close calls where Shadowhand agents almost had their cover blown, so now they had to play it safe. The report was made and sent back to Heaven's Reach, alerting them where Jaehaerys was. Chapter 75, Rescue, Retribution and Rebellion. Having learned where Jaehaerys was located, Maximus took Nyxera and 100 Wyvern riders and headed towards Qarth to bring the boy back to Heaven's Reach. In no way was he going to let Jaehaerys be used against him, and now that he knew those warlocks of Qarth had him, he was not letting something like this go. He flew all the way from Heaven's Reach to Astapor in a day where he rested the wyverns for another day before departing again. From there, he flew straight to Qarth, flying over the Red Waste. Hela, Merlin, and Lilith flew beside him, each riding on top of their own wyverns. The skies above the desert burned red with the light of the setting sun, and below them, the city of Qarth could be seen behind its massive triple walls. Without hesitation, he ordered the attack to begin. The moment they breached the outer skies of Qarth, the warlocks reacted. A wave of energy surged upward from the towers of the Warlocks Guild. One of the lead wyverns was hit, but the dwarven-crafted armor that it had around its body had absorbed the magic attack. "They were expecting us," Lilith said. "They won't be expecting this," Hela muttered, then dropped low, her wyvern turning hard as she raised her hand. From her fingertips she released her necrotic magic, green-black fire that exploded upon impact with the outer wall. The stone shattered and tumbled as it was hit. Below, the defenders of Qarth scrambled to react, armored spearmen, warlocks. Even a tamed fireworm slithered through the cracked courtyards of the city. Merlin flew higher, summoning a storm above the central tower of the 13. The clouds formed fast, and moments later, a bolt of blue-white lightning struck the tower, collapsing part of its roof in an explosion. Maximus gave another order. "Target the warlocks and leave the 13 in ruin." Dozens of wyverns descended, flames pouring from their mouths. Entire buildings caught fire as the riders focused their assault on the Warlocks Guild halls. The screams of panic filled Qarth as civilians scattered and smoke filled the sky. The warlocks counterattacked, attempting to summon illusions to twist the minds of the wyvern riders. However, these riders' minds were protected and the warlocks were not powerful enough to get in their heads while Maximus was there. Hela jumped off of her wyvern and started fighting the fireworm on the ground, while Merlin supported her, making sure the ground soldiers didn't get in her way. Maximus landed directly in front of the guild alongside a few Asgardians and Lilith. Standing in front of him, there were 12 warlocks ready to defend their city. The Asgardians were about to charge in and kill the warlocks, but Maximus put his hand up, halting them. He gazed at the warlocks, causing them to take a defensive stance and prep their defensive magic. "Tell me where the boy named Jaehaerys and I will leave, and you get to keep your lives. Refuse and lose your life, simple as that," Maximus said, his voice echoing unnaturally through the scorched plaza. The warlocks didn't move. One of them, a tall man with blue eyes, stepped forward. "The boy is no longer yours to command, Emperor. He has chosen his own path. He belongs to Qarth now, to Sono Rakaris." Maximus didn't respond. He simply extended his hand, giving the signal for the Asgardians to kill the warlocks standing in front of them. The warlocks, unaware of how strong the Asgardians were quickly overpowered. They tried to put up a fight, but the Asgardians were just faster and much stronger than they were. Their magic proved useless, especially when they couldn't even fight back against the overwhelming power of the Asgardians. Soon, the dozen defenders lay dead or dying, the courtyard littered with their broken bodies. Maximus walked past them, entering the central tower. Inside the tower's lower levels, he found a black stone chamber lined with obsidian metal, suppressing magic within its walls. In the center stood Sono Rakaris, clad in his robes, a smirk on his lips, and beside him, Jaehaerys, who stood with his arms crossed. His once boyish expression was now filled with bitterness. His silver-blonde hair was tied back, and he was wearing Qarthine armor. "Emperor," Jaehaerys said mockingly, "come to bring me home?" Maximus narrowed his eyes. "Yes, I am. If not for me, you would have never lived this long in the first place." "I never asked to be part of your empire," Jaehaerys snapped. "I was born a Targaryen, and yet I was nothing in your court. Overshadowed, dismissed, and discarded. My brother was the one shining while everybody else ignored me. You all saw me as lesser. No one saw you as lesser. You were impatient. You let your own bitterness blind you. You let this man," he pointed to Sono, "poison your mind." Sono chuckled. He came willingly, Emperor. I merely gave him what you couldn't: respect, power, and a future. You gave him lies, Maximus replied. And I've heard enough of this nonsense. In an instant Sono felt a tight grip around his neck, causing him to instinctively defend himself. He brought his hand up to launch a magic attack towards Maximus's face, but his arms wouldn't move. Starting to panic, he turned towards Jaehaerys, hoping to use the boy to free himself. But two of the Asgardians had already jumped on Jaehaerys, binding his arms. Maximus used his free hand and shoved it through Sono's body, grabbing his beating heart and crushing it. Sono's body collapsed on the floor while Maximus used his soul-reaping ability to consume his life force. Turning around, he motioned towards the Asgardians to follow him. Outside, Hela had just finished her fight with the fireworm and had used her necrotic powers to revive it under her command. Now that Hela had been to Qarth, she could now create a portal to and from the city. So, instead of flying all the way back, she opened a portal, allowing all of the wyverns to return to Heaven's Reach in an instant. Jaehaerys was thrown into a cell where his mother Riella visited him. She came to try and talk some sense into him. In King's Landing, the day of Ned Stark's execution had arrived. He was dragged from his cell towards Great September of Baelor, where he was to be executed. However, the person that they had dragged out was not Ned Stark. It was a person who he was replaced with, who was made to look like him with magic. The actual Ned Stark was snuck out of his cell the previous day and escorted to a safe house near the harbor of the city. It was there that he was united with his daughters Sansa and Arya. Meanwhile, in the Great September of Baelor, the execution had gone on as planned. Cersei had failed to control Joffrey, who had ordered Ned Stark's execution in front of the masses. A few days later, the news had already spread across the continent. Robb Stark, who had already secured an alliance with House Tully, wasn't devastated by the news. During his march, his mother revealed a few things to him, including the Shadowhand agents who told him everything. This was needed in order for Robb to focus on the war at hand and not be sidetracked by other things. So, he proceeded with his campaign against the Lannisters. In the meantime, Ned and his daughters were to remain hidden in King's Landing until they had a chance to escape and return to the north. Across the sea at Dragonstone, Stannis Baratheon declared himself king as his brother's true heir. He began to gather support from the Stormlords, with only a few answering his call. Renly Baratheon had secured support from Highgarden through a marriage with Margaery and was declared king. The reports kept piling up on Maximus's desk as he read each one of them. He already knew what was supposed to happen, but because of his interference, he wanted to see things that had changed. One of the major things that he noticed was the fact that Stannis couldn't gather enough soldiers, as the sellswords that he got from Essos in the original timeline were few in number compared to the last. So, he had to rely on lords who joined him to provide the manpower for him. Since he didn't affect the Reach that much, he wasn't surprised to see the marriage between Margaery and Renly. He wondered if they would actually be able to march on King's Landing, or if Stannis would murder his brother. Or the third option, which was his direct involvement in the war. He had already secured Dorne, so it was only a matter of time until he got more involved in the affairs of the continent.